The purpose of the debate is to have the debate at the debate. But the purpose of this is from now, May 25th to June 21st, I want the community to go 22nd. I'm talking about for the study. Because I want you to study. I want you to come into the debate so ready for the information that you are able to understand at that point, after a month of study, you are able to comprehend what we are trying to bring to you. Now let me say something about my opponent. I respect this young man. This is a beautiful brother. He has a beautiful heart, and he works tirelessly for himself and his family, for black people. So we need to give him a round of applause for the work that he does. None of us, even if we start throwing some bombs in here, because there's going to be some bombs too, none of us are adversarial to one another. We have to understand, and I wanted to say this in the first point, but I'll say it now. If you're getting threats, it's usually, one, a very over-emotional person who some kind of way got access to you. Or second, it's the counterintelligence programming that does not want us to have these discussions. That's right. And generate a level of respect, clarity, and movement in our community. When I did the debate with Natural Tahuti and we were banging on the Nawabians, I had Nawabians telling me that was going to be my last lecture. Why? Because I made critiques of their teacher that they didn't like. And there are people who are in Islam and others who are just spooky as hell. Right. They don't want nobody to say nothing about their belief. And in one sense, we have empathy for them because we understand how much damage has been done to us. We want to believe in something that can save us as a people. Whether you are atheist or non-religious, you believe in something, whether it's Wick or Allah. You believe in something that's going to be there for your security, and we haven't had the confidence in each other because we have to break down the lie. We have to tear it all the way down. So that's my job today. So be patient with us as brothers and sisters when we're doing this debate. Now, I'm on a campaign to save Polight.
Hey, can you pull the screen up?
I have exactly a month to save Brother Polight. Brother Polight is a genius. He's absolutely brilliant. But as concerned parents and people in the community who want to make sure our genius develops to its full blossom, we have to watch out for them when they cross the street. Now, we can't continue to let our youth, our young brother, believe in white God, the white gods of history. That's my premise today. He believes in the white gods of history, and those white gods are white historians who are bent upon presenting Islam to you for very specific purposes. They already have you psychotropically scared of Islam after 2001. You don't want to talk about it. You don't have no conversations on it, and the reason is because you don't want to deal with being labeled a terrorist and being Al Qaeda. That's in your mind at some level for those who fear. That's why most of us can't have a sincere discussion about Islam because of the propaganda. So now, the only people who have a proper conversation about anything is the people who are not afraid of anything. Next, Polight does not have a black chronology. What do I mean by that? Polight cannot show me a chronology other than a European scholar, whether it's medieval, so-called ancient, or modern. He has zero. And if from now until the debate and in the debate he can present that to me, he has a chance. If he doesn't, he lost. He's lost the debate. What I mean by a black chronology is when somebody says something happened in Egypt in 1250 BC, who gave them that? How did they find that out? If they say something happened in 0 AD, who gave them that? And since we're dealing with time, who are your chronologists who gave you your astronomical understanding of history? Which means history must be checked by mathematics and not opinions. You got to write this stuff down. Write it down mentally, because I'm going somewhere with this. And if you think about what I'm saying, you're going to get there. So let's do the work to get back Polight's kidnapped mind. We can't let Polight stay kidnapped. Now, first issue. I have to deal with the issue in layers, because I don't want nobody to run. The first thing that we have to do is deal with the corpus of Islam, which is said to be the Quran. That's everybody has that. Now, whether we're going to say that is a fact or not, we're dealing with what people believe based on what most people talk about. And if you say the Quran, people start thinking Islam. And that's a generally accepted belief. I'm not against it. I'm not for it right now. But what I am saying is, when we look at the Quran, and then we look at Islam outside, if Islam outside doesn't match the Quran, something will make our heads scratch and say, well, there's a problem here. If Prophet Muhammad is presented to us as an Arab, and then presented to us as a pale Arab, or presented as a black Arab to us, and the corpus of the Quran continuously gives you an anti-Arab sentiment, you gotta scratch your head and say, why does it look like an Arab religion when the whole corpus is anti-Arab? And why is it that the sheikhs and the scholars and all these people don't seem to understand or know or willing to talk about that? So the first question is the Quran an anti-Arab corpus? Is the Quran an anti-Arab and anti-Arabic corpus? The answer is, from reading it, definitively yes. And then you have to ask yourself, if you can prove that, why? What were the Arabs doing that would make the people, whoever they are, since they're not Arabs, have an anti-Arab sentiment? And how have we gotten to 2014 where Prophet Muhammad is a white Arab, a black Arab, or an Arab at all? And you believe it. So let's start with just some basic verses. These are basic verses. I put what we call transliteration. Transliteration gives you an opportunity to look the word up, go down to your local store, get you an Arabic English dictionary for $5, and then look some of these words up, so that you don't get confused. Because if he comes up here and says anything about Islam being Arab or Arabic, he's defeated. So, first verse. This is allegedly Muhammad talking, receiving revelation from somebody. An angel, spirits, meditating in the cave. We ain't got to that yet. We'll get to that. Surah 9, verse 97. This is Muhammad talking. The pale Arab, allegedly. Or the black Arab, allegedly. He says the Arabs are the strongest in disbelief and hypocrisy and most disposed to not be truly aware of the laws of what Allah has revealed to his messenger. Why is he taking that stance against the Arabs when he's already starting his message, or whatever it is, his government, his system, and he's saying these Arabs are hypocrites, they're most disposed to be against the law. If you were an Arab, would you be saying that? You could say, well, you could bring up some things that would say, well, maybe he was an Arab and he just didn't like his people in Jahiliyyah. We have those discussions, but we have to keep going. But don't deny this verse being there, because when you go to any translation, including Polight's teachers, the word that is given, well, I redact that. I put that down because he does make one elaboration on this. And my point is, most of the translators say the dwellers of the desert. They take out the original word. That's a critical point for you to study from now until the debate. I got loads of information, and I'm releasing a book on that day called The Lost Pages of Islam, and anything you want to know about Islamic history will be in the book. Anything. It continues. So I gave you transliteration. Now I want you to see the word in motion. So you say, and those around you are the hypocrite Arabs. And when you go down, and those from among you, mean of al, alif, lam, alif, ain, ra, alif, ba. Al-Arab. It's there. They're banging on the Arabs in a surah that's called the disbelievers, basically. Why is that present? Now you go outside down to Germantown Masjid and you read this to them. You know what they're going to do to you? They might turn Christian and crucify your ass. And even though they say, oh, brother, you can't understand the Quran unless you know Arabic, brother. So now you don't know Arabic. And then you come up here and you read that to them, and then what they're going to do? They're going to scratch their head and go back to the masjid, and they're going to ask the imam, I'm losing my iman. I'm losing my faith. A Satan came to me in the form of Ali Muhammad, and he's telling me Muhammad is not an Arab. Muhammad is not a pale Arab. Muhammad is not a black Arab. And Muhammad detested the Arabs. And Muhammad fought against the Arabs. And we can prove it. We can prove it from the white scholars. That's an easy one. That's a fence that if we still got to jump over that, it shows how far away we are from any history. But it's here. So now, if this is not Arab, he just needs to tell me that. Let's keep going. Muhammad didn't exist. Okay, if Muhammad didn't exist, who did exist? And how do we prove who existed? How do we prove whether somebody existed or not? What criteria do we get to say that person existed? Did King Tut exist? Or did somebody make that up? Somebody told you they got a body. You saw some things that looked like King Tut. So you said, oh, that's King Tut. But you never knew King Tut before that. He grew up on your block. My point on the contention of whether Muhammad existed or not is depending on the level of criteria that you use to prove who existed and where they existed and how they existed. Because if you say Muhammad didn't exist and we have evidence that somebody with a title or name Muhammad was on inscriptions, coinage, epigraphy that's been there for all this time, then we can say a Muhammad existed, something called Muhammad existed, because we can do the same thing about your great-great-great-great-grandfather who you never seen. Or your great-great-great-great-grandmother. You know somebody existed, but somebody said, yeah, his name was Floyd Jones, and your name is Jones. See, I got a death certificate from 1895. Does that mean that he existed as Floyd Jones, or does that mean you have a death certificate that says he existed? So this is a question that we have to ask ourselves, because I want you to get into now historianism. And what's the importance of it anyway? But we do have records that are non-Islamic records that repeatedly say somebody named Muhammad was causing some confusion. And it was the people who would be considered his enemy, or their enemy, and this is just one source. There's a whole book of sources on it. I'm going to give you some of the sources. Seeing Islam as others saw it. All right? A survey and evaluation of Christian, Jewish, and Zoroastrian writings on early Islam. All right? And this author, let's go through this. I want to pull something out of this. Well, I'm not going to do that. Robert Hoyland. But read this book, or get this book. Because if you want to have a historical discussion, why you have this historical discussion and I have the best material or the most extensive material on it? According to this, Muhammad was mentioned in history. And somebody could have made it up, but we have to be able to prove that if they did or not. That's the source. All right. Why Islam? There's a big, I'm going to prove this with empirical data at the debate. There's a big discussion about Islam and Muhammad coming from Christianity. Right? The people was Christians first. Now, we got to stop having silly discussion. Because somebody could come to me and say, Ali Muhammad, he a Muslim or he into Hotepism. He was a Christian first. Yeah, because Christians conquered me. And my ancestors. If I grew up in a house, Polight grew up a Christian. Maybe not directly in the church, making baptism and all of that. But he grew up with a Christian name, just like me, just like you. And all black people who got conquered by Christians became Christians by default. So now you're going to look at Elijah Muhammad 100 years from now and say, oh, see, he came from Christianity. It's a dumb discussion in that sense because that particular Byzantine Empire conquered indigenous people in Africa and what we call in the so-called Levant or so-called Middle East. So they had a system imposed upon them and they showed resistance. However, this concept became Tawheed. Tawheed? You ever hear Tawheed? Any Muslims in here? Tawheed is what? The oneness of the Creator. This became an argument amongst indigenous people and non-indigenous people. Greco-Romans. We'll call them Greco-Romans right now. And the concept was shaped or reformed by European historians to talk about a church that one was a Oriental church and one was the Greek Orthodox church. You got to know these two. The Oriental church composed of Ethiopia, Eritrea, Egypt, the Copts, and Syria, according to what people tell us. And the Greek Orthodox Church composed of Russians, Armenians, Europeans, Constantinople. So there was a war over discussion of Tawheed. What I'm going to prove at the debate, what white people did is do what's called redact a history. They took the original argument and they threw Jesus on the Tawheed concept and made it into an argument on whether you had Jesus being the Son of God and God, or Jesus just being a man and a prophet of God. That was a big discussion in history. I don't want to lose you on these points, but I need you to understand that the word Tawheed, here we go with language. The word Tawheed didn't start with the Quran. The word Tawheed is a Ge'ez word. Tawhido. Tawhido in Eritrea means the way that you honor the Creator. The methodology that you give no associations to the power that operates the universe. And they had an astronomical principle behind it. A force that moved all things, not a belief in a spook that cast down spells. So if we can go to a language called Ge'ez, which is mentioned as the language of the Quran. The language of the Quran is called Ge'ez or Ge'ezan. That's the language. And Tawheed is talked about in documents 400-500 years before the said Islamic epic. So ask a Muslim, where does Tawheed come from? And they're going to say, well, Muhammad rebirthed Tawheed. From who? If Tawheed was a concept and he got it, did he jump across the Arabian Peninsula into Africa and then came back and brought Tawheed to Arabia? Muhammad was not even born in Arabia. They changed the geography on you. So show me your maps. If you say the Hijaz, where was the Hijaz for black people and where was the Hijaz for white people? Since Muhammad was born in the Hijaz. We got to answer these questions. We got to answer this question. What were the names that Europeans used for the people who founded Islam? The most used term was Saracen. Saracen. And when Europeans comment on the Saracens, on how they physically look, this is their records. I'm going to come to our records in a minute. And so we said we were black for a reason. They said we were black. Why was this issue? What was the issue of who was black or not? There's an issue now about you being black and them being white. And we think racism started in the 20th century. So why is the author of the Quran anti-white and pro-black? And why did the Europeans describe these Saracens who later became Muslims as what? Hoarders blacker than the blackest ink? No shred of white on them except their teeth. You know who Charlemagne was according to European history. He was the most anti-Islamic king in Europe, besides the Pope himself.